Miramar encompasses roughly 23,000 acres. While the airbase community covers 12,000 acres, Miramar's property continues east of Interstate 15, with another 11,000 acres of undeveloped land used for military training.
When you're driving near MCAS Miramar and you see F-18 circling the base, there's a good chance you're getting a glimpse of field carrier landing practice.
Missile altitude starting at 1,100 feet at the 180 there, after the 180.
Miramar is home to the only Marine carrier squadron on the West Coast.
The advantages of being on a carrier and being any place in the world in a very, very short amount of time. The ability to actually land and take off from that platform, while it is an administrative task for us, is extremely difficult.
It never gets easy for us, because you're always striving for that perfect pass.
To help pilots hone their skills, an outline of a carrier deck is painted on the runway at Miramar. While it doesn't move like an actual carrier on the ocean, it does provide a very specific target. And no matter their experience, pilots practice landing and taking off here hundreds of times throughout their career.
All that stuff is a perishable skill, so we have to train to it all the time. It's not something like when you earn your driver's license, you have it forever.
On this day, we were allowed to join the ground observers just feet away from the landing zone.
It's an overwhelming feeling to be this close to the runway as they approach, and it is a feeling absolute power.
In fact, the jets land with as much power as possible, just would on an actual carrier, so they have enough thrust to abort a landing if necessary. The exercise is often referred to as touch and go.
Every landing, especially for guys that go to the ship, we try to treat it as if it's a carrier-style landing. There's different ways to land the F-18, and we always try to keep it as a carrier-style landing.
At the end of the day, I'd really like to survive landing on carrier, and I'd like to do it well. So whatever time I have, I will practice on that little tennis court-sized box until I get it perfect.
While being able to take off and land from an aircraft carrier in a jet like this is a must, there's also the mission in between, which often means delivering powerful ordnance on a target. Well, the men and women that load those munitions on these planes takes us to a very remote part of the base.
Welcome to the combat loading and arming area at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar.
Is there a way to describe the explosive force of these bombs?
It's big.
On a patch of tarmac well separated from the hangars and working areas of other Marines, a specialized crew loads bombs and rockets onto the fighter.
They separate you guys from the rest of the airfield by some distance.
That's correct.
It's a little unsettling.
It is at times, but it's what we do every day, so it's not anything to us, really.
Corporal Matt Petzold is the ordnance line chief. He says multiple safeguards on the ground and in the air ensure these weapons only go off when intended.
You know, it has to be at a certain angle for it to actually arm up. The pilot has to initiate it in the cockpit.
And that's exactly what pilots have been doing this day, 150 miles to the northeast, as part of live fire training with Marines on the ground at 29 Paul.
We do about 8 combined arms exercises every year, known as integrated training exercise.
It's practice in what is known as close air support, though as Lieutenant Colonel Brian Shank explains, this is a relative term.
You know, we don't want to get too close. 1, because now the enemy may be able to hear us. 2, because the enemy may be able to see us and shoot us.
The Lieutenant Colonel, who is the commanding officer of the squadron, says most often the F-18 stay at high altitude, unseen by ground forces on either side until their ordnance hits the target.
They just get to see the impacts.
And as we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan, the results are generally obliteration.
Tanks, buildings, structures, all kinds, you name it.
Did you hit your target today?
I did. They said it had good effects on the target, so mission success.
Fighter pilots at Miramar also train extensively in air-to-air combat or dogfighting, but it is a skill that hasn't been used by U.S. pilots in conflict since the early 90s during the Gulf War, as the enemies of the U.S. are incapable or simply unwilling to face off in such combat. Now, we're going to take you up to the best view in the base, that is, without being in an aircraft, the control tower.
165, 104, 544.
I'm the one who has to be mindful and ensure that they don't
switch through the same lane, so to speak.
As 3 F-18 circle MCAS Miramar practicing carrier-style landings, air traffic controllers are keeping close watch.
Dallas 166, team gear down, stage 6.4, pilot Henson.
Sergeant Blair is an advanced student working under the supervision of Department of Defense Controller Kevin Pelham. Pelham is retired military, one of 9 civilians on staff at the tower to ensure continuity, since active duty Marines tend to be moved around.
When I'm talking to the students, though, I always think about what the pilot's seeing.
Pelham says in order to relay the best directions to pilots, he teaches air traffic control students to imagine themselves in the cockpit and to be aware of the type of aircraft the pilot is in.
Small Cessnas, which private pilots start in initially, they have a high wing. So the high wing, they can't see up above them as easily unless they tip their wings. And then and all of our fast guys, they have low wings. So once they go into a hard turn, they have to see where they are beforehand. Once they turn, they can't see what's below them.
That's the I-15 just off our approach in.
Miramar is roughly bounded by the 15 and 805 freeways to the east and west, and state routes 56 and 52 to the north and south. Most military air exercises happen within that perimeter, but controllers here monitor much more.
They say at any given time, a third of the air traffic is located in Southern California at any given time.
Air traffic specialist Dennis Waters, also retired military, says it's not uncommon for small planes to be allowed passage through Miramar airspace, which rises 3,000 feet above the base. Above that, it's FAA territory, used by commercial planes.
There's an arrival quarter that they take the air carriers over the top of us at, 5,000 to 7,000 feet into Lindbergh if they're coming from the north.
It's a giant puzzle, and we all enjoy doing it.
Sergeant Blair is 22 years old. As demand for air travel continues to grow, he calculates a steady flight path for a long career.
There's plenty of opportunities. You can apply this anywhere in the world, so it's great, and I'm very grateful to be in this position that I am.
Miramar train controllers are working at LAX, Lindbergh Field, Gillespie Field, just to name some regional airports. Now, when we come back, we're going to go even higher than that tower as I pull some G's with the Blue Angels. They tell me the trick is not to pass out or get sick. We'll see what happens right after this.
Time for another test. Commercial aircraft flying into San Diego International Airport often fly over MCAS Miramar, but must maintain an altitude of at least A, 3,000 feet, B, 5,000